Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan McNeil. This is the Builder by Day podcast. Thanks very much for tuning in. Today's episode is a little different than anything I've done before because my wife is here. She's sitting right there, just beyond my reach, and looking at some things here this morning and having a conversation with my wife because I like my wife. I enjoy her presence. A couple things I want to talk about here today in no particular order. So if you hadn't already heard, there has been a ban put in place by the Nova Scotia government. Well, in their mind, it is to hopefully reduce the chances of there being any forest fires here in Nova Scotia. First of all, it took effect August 5th, and it will be in effect until October 15th. So basically, this isn't even just like, hey, we're going to do this for a couple weeks and see how it goes. They're like, yeah, for the next 2.5 months, you are not allowed to go in the woods. It was funny this morning, too. I was watching a news piece. Were you there when we were watching that? We were watching that news piece, and the CBC News guy was like standing out at Point Pleasant Park in Halifax. He's standing at Point Pleasant Park, and he's talking about this ban, how you can't go in the woods, and you're not allowed to go into the parks or anything. And as he's standing in front of the opening, like the entrance to the trails at Point Pleasant Park, and it's this morning at like 7:30 a.m., and he's talking about how it's banned. You're not allowed in the woods. You're not allowed on the trails. You're not allowed. He's like, in a park like this, here's an example behind me. You're not allowed going in here anymore. And as he's talking, there's like streams of people going for their morning jog or their morning walk. There's these old people just walking out behind him. And and he's talking about how it's a $25,000 fine. Well, shouldn't all of those people right now be being fined? They're walking out of the woods. You're pointing to where they're not allowed to be, and they're walking out of where you're pointing to. That doesn't make any sense. Anyways, August 5th to October 15th, the ban includes hiking, camping, fishing, trail use, vehicles in the woods. Camping is only allowed in official campgrounds. No open wood fires are allowed. $25,000 fine per violation. Woods are defined as forested land, rock barren, brushland, dry marsh, bog, muskeg. All woody area trails are closed. Permits are required for designated travel or commercial use. Under the ban, no person shall travel in the woods or engage in a travel activity in the woods without a permit. The Department of Natural Resources allows for permits for commercial purposes, including forestry, mining. There's going to be a cost associated with that permit. And it's also most likely going to be a real pain in the ass to get it. Anyways, just more government control. We don't know what we're doing, so we're just going to shut her down. I saw them post that yesterday on Twitter. Breaking news. Stay out of the woods. Nova Scotia bans forest activities amid dry spell. Okay, I don't think I think dry spell is probably a little bit underselling it. It's a little more than a dry spell. But I had comment and said, Nova Scotia's solution to drought risk, ban everyone from the woods. When you have no experience and no idea how to solve real problems, you just shut everything down and hope nothing happens. That's what they do. They've done it before many times, and they're doing it more often now. Remember the days of COVID? We don't know what we're doing. So everyone is not allowed to do anything. Honest God, man. Okay, the forests are dry and we're not really sure what we're supposed to do here. So no one is allowed to go into the woods. First of all, that's stupid, man. As a matter of fact, I could probably make an argument that going into the woods on a hike might be beneficial. You got some eyeballs in there. You got some people looking around like, hey, I saw somebody doing something that they shouldn't be, or I saw a fire or whatever, right? It'd be interesting to know, like in the last whatever period of time, like however they measure dryness, if it's ever been this dry. Because, it's dry as shit out there. I don't disagree that it is super, super dry and like dangerously dry. But telling people they're not allowed to go into the woods, that is some balmy overreach shit there, man. They have no problem doing it because anytime there's something that they think is justification for it, then they just do it. Oh, well, we think that this government overreach, this control, this telling people what to do is justified because there's this looming thing that is a very real concern if it happens. But, you could make that argument about anything. Anyways, that's the Nova Scotia fire ban. Yesterday on Twitter, I made a comment. Mark Carney had posted, not him posting. He obviously doesn't post this shit. It's whoever manages his Twitter account. But they had posted a message and said, facing a shifting trade landscape, we're turning challenges into opportunities. Canada's new government is helping the softwood lumber sector to diversify its markets and products to seize new opportunities as we massively scale up construction on housing and major projects. So then I responded to that post and said, fail miserably at the one job you are elected to do, then spin it as a win because you are creating new customers with taxpayer money. Economic strategy, Ottawa style. So in other words, this guy completely and purposely fumbled the trade agreement stuff with the US and all that shit. I mean, he just basically failed to do his job. He failed to even attempt to do his job. The one thing that both Carney and all the liberals and all the media told everyone that they were doing, the reason why we were supposed to vote for this guy is because he was going to handle Trump. He's the best guy to handle Trump. He's going to deal with him. All of his banker experience is going to make him handle Trump. What a crock of shit, man. This guy literally ran and hid. That's what he did. He got elected and then he ran away. He ran away to Europe. He ran around all these different places, but not the US. He made no attempt to talk to Donald Trump. He didn't try to call him. He didn't try to negotiate. He just said, we're not going to talk to Donald Trump. We're not going to talk to the US because they're being mean to us. It's crazy, man. So now they're saying, oh, don't worry, everyone. It's okay. It's okay that our trade agreement with our largest trade partner, and it's not even close. The amount of trade between Canada and the US it's stupid how much we do, right? It's stupid that there would be any consideration to like not focusing on that relationship. It should be the absolute most important thing that this guy's dealing with. As a matter of fact, he said when he ran for election, it was the most important thing. Remember? We're facing a crisis like no other. The most important thing in the world right now is dealing with the US and Donald Trump. And then he got elected. And his version of dealing with it was to literally do nothing. And then say, we're not going to do anything because Trump's a big meanie. And that's our justification for not doing anything. It's fucking wild, man. But now what this dude is saying, like, don't worry about the US. We're going to spin this thing into a new opportunity. We're going to create new customers how did he word it? As we massively scale up construction on housing and major projects. First of all, that's bullshit. They're not massively scaling up construction on anything. That's such bullshit. Point to one example that the federal government is scaling up. So in other words, what you're saying is the federal government is going to massively scale up construction on housing and major projects. First of all, these major projects have nothing to do with lumber. Like if you're referring to pipelines and so on, it has nothing to do with lumber. But if you're talking about scaling up construction on housing, you mean government housing. So your answer to destroying the trade relationship with our largest trade partner is for Canadian taxpayers to spend more money building housing. You want the Canadian taxpayer to replace the US as your number one customer? That's crazy, man. The average person who doesn't have any business experience, or like real life business experience of owning and operating a business and dealing with other business owners and relationships and trade and terms of the agreement and all those things, right? Like the construction business is a very good example of it because that's what we do. Builders and sub-trades and suppliers and subcontractors and so on, we have agreements and we have like terms to those agreements. And sometimes those terms change. And sometimes, one person, it could be the contractor, it could be the subcontractor, it could be the supplier. One of them, for whatever reason, says, hey, we're changing our terms. And you might say, well, we don't want to change the terms. And then they might then say to you, well, that's fine, but it's not up to you. We still want your business. We'd still like to keep doing business with you. But, moving forward, we're going to be charging a fuel surcharge on all our deliveries. That happened during COVID. There's going to be this fuel surcharge. I mean, everyone did that. Every supplier was putting a fuel surcharge on. As a home builder, I didn't put a fuel surcharge on the price of the home that I was selling to the customer. So that means those fuel surcharges we were just eating in our industry, right? But it would have been very short-sighted for me to say, oh, well, screw you guys. If you're going to put a fuel surcharge on, then I'm going to go find other tradespeople or suppliers to work for me. Because even if those other tradespeople or suppliers were willing to initially do any work with no fuel surcharge, eventually they would realize that their margins aren't making sense. And then they would say, hey, man, we have to put our prices up because we're getting hammered here on the price of fuel, right? Certainly the liberal government must be smart enough to figure this out. That's why they do it. And the media just does whatever the liberal government tells them at this point in this country. But, clearly they are onto the fact that the average person just doesn't have any business sense. They just don't know how the world works. They don't understand how negotiations work. They don't understand how leverage works. They don't understand how a company's position in relation to the other company's position affects how they're going to do business and how this agreement's going to go when they put together an agreement, right? And then the media and the government, the liberal government, well, they certainly don't try to explain how the relationship works. They basically try to insinuate that the relationship is something that the average person could relate to, like a personal relationship. So they talk about Donald Trump like he's a big meanie, like he's a bully and he's abusing us and he's not being nice to us. And like they talk like that, like you would talk about somebody who's mistreating you in a personal relationship. I even had somebody say that to me on Twitter. Here's a good example of how you should deal with a situation like this versus how the Canadian government is dealing with a situation like this. So about a year ago, one of my sub-trade suppliers, who is like a supply and install supplier. So I don't want to say who it is because I don't want to out this guy because anyone locally will put two and two together and I don't want to call this guy out, okay? But this is somebody who supplied and installed a product, a certain part of the house, okay? I probably used this guy to do this work for me exclusively for probably 17 or 18 years. And during that 17 or 18 years, it's not that we never had issues. Like the guy he was kind of a cranky old guy. And sometimes like I didn't have a lot of communication with him, but sometimes maybe once a year, I might have to reach out to him and just, and when I call him, be like, hey, Ryan, how's it going? Everybody's all kind of, they always talk differently to the person who signs the checks, right? Sometimes he would get to be a bit of a dick to like some of the staff, right? And he's just a guy that owns his own business, small business owner, older guy, kind of cranky, probably should have retired years ago. But they did good work. And in fairness, the work that they provided is not something I ever had issue with. So my number one priority when I hire someone or keep going back to someone as a tradesperson or a supplier is that my number one thing I need from them is for them to provide consistent, reliable quality, right? So that I know that I don't have to, that's not a concern. I can deal with things like pricing issues or maybe even some personality conflicts or so on. But one thing that I don't tolerate among my suppliers is I don't put up with unreliable people, and I definitely don't put up with low quality. So they know exactly how we want things done, and it needs to be done that way. And it's not negotiable. And he was always good with that stuff. Like I never had any problem with the product or service that he provided. But sometimes he would just be a bit of a dick. Every time it'd be the same thing. I would call him. I didn't have to like curse and swear and get worked up. I just had to basically call him and let him know that, listen, man, I'm still paying attention, by the way. Like, just because I'm not the one calling you doesn't mean that I'm not paying attention. And when things get to a certain point that the people who I have designated to deal with this stuff find you too difficult to deal with, then they come to me and say, oh man, this guy's being kind of difficult to deal with. And I might say to them, even before I call this guy, I might say to them, well, what's the problem? Well, he said this or he did this. I'm like, well, sounds like he was probably kind of right in that case. Or, well, you did make him go back for something. You should have had it ready the first time. So I'll play devil's advocate. Like I'll make sure that I don't just assume that because somebody on my team came to me with a concern about somebody else. I don't just assume that my guys are in the right? Because sometimes they're not. And this guy was like pretty old school. He would handwrite his invoices. He had a little, what do you call it? One of those little carbon copy notepad thing dealies. And so he would handwrite his invoice and he would send his invoice in. And I mean, it was very simple. It just was like one of those little notepads that you get at the dollar store, right? And that's fine. It's address, his HST number's on there, his business number's on there. He puts the address on so we know what to bill it to. He's got the price and the HST and the total and boom, right? I mean, that's all, everything was there that needed to be, but he's a pretty simple guy. And this had happened in the past where he sends an invoice in and the invoice is not correct, right? It's just too high. And then we call him and say, the invoice is wrong. It should be 15,000 and it's 17.5 or something like that, right? Now in the past, he would look into it, and a few times in the past, like my staff weren't successful in getting the answer we need. So then I would call him and say, what's going on with this invoice? Why is the invoice $17,500 instead of $15,000. What's the scoop? And then he might look in and go, oh yeah, sorry about that. I mixed it up. But normally these guys aren't making a mistake. It's normally like, let's see who's paying attention. We'll slide it in there another couple $1,000. And guys do that. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's true. But anyway, the story is that with this particular guy, even though I had a long-standing relationship with him and he worked for me for like 17 or 18 years, and really I didn't have any real major complaints during that time. We had our issues, but they always got resolved. But then he was getting more and more difficult. And I'm like, you know what? Let's give a couple of jobs to our sort of backup supplier. And our backup supplier was, in fairness, they did the same quality work. Their pricing was the same. And if anything, they were more organized in their billing. But by default, I'm loyal to the people who are loyal to me. Like, not to my detriment. I wouldn't stay loyal to someone if their pricing was significantly more or if their quality wasn't good or so on. But all things being equal, I will stick with the people who I've been with, right? I'll kind of like dance with the lady that brought you, or whatever that expression is. But it's not even so much that. It's more like I don't generally exchange a new supplier or tradesperson for somebody who I'm happy with. There's no reason to do that. There's no reason to go switching around and sort of turn your back on somebody who's been there and working with you for all these years just because this guy offered to do the job for $500 less. Now, if you're a volume builder and you build, 2,000 homes a year or 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is that some of these super huge volume builders do. Honestly, even if you build 100 homes a year, which is far more than we build, then $500 on a house, if it's something that's all things being equal, there's no difference. It's just this guy's $500 less. Then yeah, you might make that switch because 500 times 100 is a significant amount of money, right? But I don't generally operate that way. I generally stick with who I have. And unless they give me a reason to go looking, I don't go looking. I mean, I have sub-trades that have worked for me from the beginning, from the absolute beginning. And I've never used anybody else other than them. One thing I'll always do is I'll always price shop it a little bit. Like at least once a year, I'll have my staff kind of go around and get some pricing to make sure that the people we're using are still providing us with competitive pricing. That's a fair thing to do. No different than I would expect a client who comes to me and talks with us about building a home. I would expect, and I would recommend even, that they also talk to a couple other builders and get pricing, right? You want to feel confident that, yeah, you're happy with it, but you want to make sure that you're not missing something and maybe you're being charged 10% more than you should be. The situation was this particular supplier, tradesperson, sent an invoice that was too much, like thousands of dollars too much. My staff looked into it and he was kind of just being dismissive about it, right? It was like he just wouldn't address it. By now, my staff member has come to me and said, what do you want me to do with this? Because here's the deal. I've asked him to look into it. He has responded and said, nope, it's correct. So then what is normally the case, and in this case, what happens is my staff member then responds to this gentleman and says, okay, well, thanks for getting back to me, but I can't approve this invoice. It's still we're not in agreement here. So I'm just going to put this on Ryan's desk and we'll leave it at that. And he left it at, okay. Now, I had already told my staff member to tell this person that you're going to put the invoice on my desk and I'm going to deal with it. If nothing else, that should be enough for him to seriously look into it and or contact me, right? Because we have a relationship of 17 or 18 years and I don't bother this guy. This guy's like, we just call him with an address and he goes and does the job and he sends an invoice and we pay him. Like we are as easy a customer as he could ever ask for. And in return, I just expect him to be also easy to deal with. But when he's purposely difficult to deal with, like this guy, then some things have to change. So what I did then was told my staff, okay, don't bother mentioning anything to subtrade number one, but just call the backup guys and let them know that we're going to be throwing them some more work. Make sure that they have the capacity for it, that they can handle it, that they want the work. And so we reached out to them and they said, yeah, we'd love to do more of your work. Okay, great. So you're going to be doing this next one and so on. Now, that's how you have to do that. You have to have your second option lined up before you get rid of your first option. So like here in Canada, all the liberal people like to talk about and support the idea of diversifying our trade and going to Europe and Mexico and Asia and all these things we're talking about. But none of that is set up. Like not even remotely close. And remember, you'd have to set it up. What I mean by set up is you would have to have an equal amount of trade already set up and ready to take place immediately before you start screwing yourself over on your trade with the US, or before you decide you're not going to even converse with the US. Like you're not even going to talk to them about it. So this scenario for me is I had everything lined up and then this guy just wasn't cooperating anymore and he's being difficult. So we said, okay, man, I like you and we've done a lot of work together, but you don't do anything special. I can get my such and such from somebody else, right? I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to out the guy, right? So that's what we did. And sure enough, like about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call. I saw his number come up on my phone and he doesn't call me very often. Like we could go, 2 years could go by and never hear from this guy. So I saw his number come up and I knew what it was about. And it's like, oh, hey, Ryan, how's it going? Yeah, not bad, man. Oh, I was just wondering what was going on. I priced up that house and it looks like somebody else is doing it. I'm like, yeah, man, we're giving some work to these guys now because you didn't seem like you wanted it anymore. Oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, well, look, man, you want me to run back through this scenario with you? Like, I'm sure you're aware of it. You sent the invoice. The invoice was incorrect. My staff contacted you and you basically said, screw you. The invoice is correct. And then they said, hey, well, we're going to have to mention this to Ryan. He said, oh, yeah, but he said he was going to put it on your desk and you were going to look at it. I'm like, no, dude, that doesn't mean you should expect a call from me. That's what they say right before they say, okay, then you, we're going to go with somebody else from now on, right? Like that's the whole point. It's a very similar example where from his perspective, like I'm the one making the change. I'm the one that decided I don't like what this guy's doing. So I'm going to diversify and go to somebody else. But I had that set up first, right? I didn't call this guy and say, hey man, screw you. You're screwing us on this invoice. I don't like your attitude. I'm done with you. I'm calling somebody else. If I did that first, and then I had a house that was ready for him to do the work in next week, and he was lined up, or 2 houses or 4 houses, whatever it is. If I didn't have somebody else lined up, then that's going to be to my detriment. Also, if I didn't have someone lined up, I might realize, oh shit, his price may have been incorrect from our perspective, but comparatively to what's out there in the market, his price was exactly correct. So all I did there was burn a bridge with somebody who was providing me with reliable quality work. And really his pricing was the same thing anyone else is going to give me anyway. So I'm no further ahead here, but now I've burned a relationship that was good, right? Even though this guy was being a dick, even though he should have done this better, even though he should have been a better communicator, he should have been less of a jerk, he should have been more cooperative. You don't burn your own company down to make a point. But here in this country, that's what these guys are doing. So it's like, oh, Trump has changed the terms of the agreement. We already have an agreement, but Trump's changing the terms. Yeah. So then what you do is you communicate with him, and you being the prime minister, right? You're the CEO of this company. He's the CEO of that company. You guys get it together. That's what you do. You call him up. And it's not like he's not trying to make an effort. Like every day Trump's online talking to the media, and specifically oftentimes talking about Canada and the trade, and he references Mark Carney and he talks about how he hasn't heard from him. Like it's very obvious that Carney made no effort to do anything about this. As a matter of fact, they made a deliberate effort to do nothing about it. They made a deliberate effort to basically say, we're not going to talk to Donald Trump because he's a big mean bully, and we're going to go replace all this trade that we do with the US somewhere else. You talk to these people, it's like they have zero real life business experience. They have zero leadership experience. They've never been in a position where they're in charge, right? Like they have to make decisions on behalf of other people. And certainly at the federal government level, and certainly with Mark Carney, this guy has never, ever been in charge of anything. People think like the governor of the Bank of Canada is some position that, you just default to being, if you're the governor of the Bank of Canada, then that's all I need to hear. You should be the prime minister. We're just going to ignore that book you wrote that very clearly stipulates and says exactly where you stand on these things. We're just going to ignore that. We're also just going to ignore, your relationship with Brookfield being a board member and their relationship and how Brookfield owns all these properties and how they're so involved in modular housing. And now you're pushing modular housing. And then last night I saw something with Mark Carney that was, he made that forestry announcement. Yeah. So here's another one. Yesterday, Mark Carney announced that when they were talking about softwood lumber. On August 5th, yesterday, Mark Carney unveiled a major federal support package for Canada's softwood lumber industry, $1.2 billion in total. This includes up to $700 million in loan guarantees and $500 million for product development and export diversification initiatives that directly impact major producers like West Fraser. Now listen to this. West Fraser Timber is a likely beneficiary of this. As one of Canada's largest softwood lumber producers, West Fraser stands to benefit significantly from Carney's announcement programs, loan guarantees to maintain operations and restructure amid trade disruption, funding for innovation and export diversification, particularly in engineered wood and mass timber, support for upskilling workers, as West Fraser employs thousands across BC. And you know who owns a major stake in West Fraser Lumber? Brookfield. I don't understand how people can be in denial of this. Pretend Pierre Poilievre owned a major stake in Brookfield, used to be a board member, was the vice chair of Brookfield at one point, had all those relationships with Brookfield. First of all, he would have never got elected. Then pretend after he's got elected, all these, what was it, 100 conflicts of interest or something crazy, all those conflicts of interest that came up. Imagine, do you think the country would just ignore that if that was Poilievre? Not a chance. If you are somebody who doesn't currently have a Twitter account or an X account, I would recommend you set one up. Use your Gmail address, use an email address. If you don't want to use your regular email address, then go to Gmail, set up a new Gmail account, just call it whatever. This isn't my real Gmail at gmail.com, whatever you want to do. And then go set up an X account using that Gmail account. And you don't have to use your real name. Set it up anonymously. Use a fake name. Don't just put a bunch of numbers and letters there that doesn't mean anything. Put only the absolute minimum amount of energy and the absolute minimum amount of information in there that you have to. But set up an account, unless somebody else is sort of doing this and keeping you in the loop. Set up an account and follow the news media, for instance, that you might normally follow. So if you're somebody who watches the CBC or CTV or Global or whatever, start by at least following them or those accounts. But don't just read the article. Don't just read the news article or the headline and move on. Look at what the comments are, because that gives you a gauge of what people think about that headline or what something yet you may not be aware of, or there's a headline about something, or there's a comment or a post that you see and somebody adds something to it and you scroll down a little bit and you realize, holy shit, okay, I think there's something that I didn't realize here. All these people are mentioning something that's very real, and then you can look into it. And then from there, learn how to use AI like ChatGPT, or in Twitter, you can just use Grok and just talk to it. Just ask questions until you understand a little more that you can make a decision on it. But I think everyone should have a Twitter account. And I don't mean you have to go on there every day and review it and look at it. But if there was something going on right now, today, recently, when it comes to things like the fire ban or the ban about going in the woods, or the trade thing that's going on, or whatever it might be, it is useful to go in there and get the information. And I'll tell you, the other thing about Twitter that you'll find is there is a tremendous amount of information and news about things going on in the world that you will have no idea even exist if you're not on there. And not just Twitter. These things also get referenced on things like TikTok and Instagram and so on. You don't use Twitter. I use Twitter. But oftentimes, you might mention something to me that you saw, or vice versa, and we've each seen it on on Twitter or TikTok, for instance, right? Somewhere on social media or YouTube or whatever it might be. The topic might be covered on any number of those social media platforms, but Twitter's different. Twitter's where people are I don't want to say debating it, because there's not really a lot of intellectual debate taking place. One important thing there is that politicians do go to social media and post things and say, here's what's going on. And it's not always argumentative. Like Tim Houston, our premier, I mean, he uses Twitter on a regular basis. Like, I don't know how often. I feel like daily he's saying something on there. But certainly every time that there is any kind of information that they feel is important, they put it out on Twitter. And you're not going to get all of that even on your local news. You're not going to get all of the things that your premier is saying on, your typical mainstream media, right? Here's an example. So check this out, Aim. This guy said, Carney offered himself as best to deal with the situation and has proven so. We've preserved CUSMA so far, which puts Canada and Mexico in better shape than most of America's trading partners. Every trade partner now has some kind of new baseline tariffs, agreed or imposed, plus the so-called sectoral tariffs. Only 2 have CUSMA protection. Trump's protectionist fantasies are wrecking free trade for Americans. The rest of us need to preserve it for the rest of the world. Carney is focused on that within our country, amongst our provinces, and with our other trade partners. Godspeed. And I said, Carney, quote unquote, preserved CUSMA by doing nothing while Trump raised tariffs to 35%. It's not strategy, it's surrender. You're bragging about bare minimum access while Canada made zero effort to meet terms, negotiate, or even respond. Carney ducked the fight and left Canadian businesses holding the bill. Okay. Now, of course, this dude isn't going to respond to me, right? He doesn't want any of this. Then down here, here's a couple of lunatic responses that I can highlight for you. This person here says, yeah, Trump's decisions are based on logic. Ha ha, I guess that means. Even Americans are realizing he's a demented buffoon in cognitive decline that's destroying their economy. His reasons for 35% tariffs on Canada are irrational. It has nothing to do with Canada, and there are no official deals. And I said, you can cry all you want about Trump, but he holds the power, and he used it. Carney's job was to protect Canadians' interests, not sit silently while tariffs jumped to 35%. Whether you like the reason or not, the U.S. gave the deadline and conditions, and Carney ignored it. Then she said, sitting silently. He's not advertising what he's doing, which is wise. You have no idea what's going on privately, which is how negotiations should be done. If you're so unhappy, move to the U.S. You seem to admire the pedo in the White House and his buffoonery. Okay, first of all, nowhere in here have I said that I'm a Trump fan, obviously. Now, this other genius down here, what she said was, this is a good one. To my original comment, she said, oh, so you were directly part of the negotiations and meetings? Do tell. You're making assumptions that cannot be backed up by facts. None of us know what was offered as a deal by either side. And I said, I don't need to be in the room to read public deadlines, ignored terms, and the 35% tariffs that followed. Trump said that would happen if Canada didn't respond, and Carney didn't. It's not a secret. It's cause and effect. And then she said, LOL, LOL. This is utter nonsense. You have no clue what was said during negotiations. No one does except the team that was present in the room. You are hilarious. Now, this person has no idea what they're talking about. And secondly, what team in the room? What are you talking about? What room? There was no negotiations. There's no team. That's what I'm saying. These people have no idea. They actually think that Carney and the Canadian administration went down and we've been back and forth with the U.S. and trying to work it out and negotiate things. And they're sitting in the room. They're back. They did nothing. They literally did nothing. They made no attempt whatsoever. These people are delusional. So I said, what negotiations? Neither Carney or anyone from his administration made any effort to meet the terms or even contact Trump. So again, what exactly are you talking about? And then at this point, she realizes she has nothing. So she says, oh man, thanks for the Sunday laughs. And then I said, I'm glad the truth gave you a few laughs. If that's how you react to basic facts, you should stick around. I'll have you pissing yourself. And then she said, oh, I don't stick around or linger for long. This sight rots the brain. And I said, I can tell. That same topic, and I'm talking about Carney and tariffs and the fact that they didn't do anything. And this other person chimed in after a little bit of back and forth. At first, I thought she might have half a brain in her head, but unfortunately, she didn't. And at the end of it, she made a comment like, if a relationship becomes abusive, then it's time to leave that relationship and find someone else or whatever. I'm like, this isn't some personal, intimate partner relationship, right? This is two sovereign nations negotiating a trade agreement or terms of a trade agreement. This has nothing to do with like, this isn't your boyfriend's being a jerk and it's time to move on, or you're in an abusive personal relationship and it's time to move on. First of all, this is not a personal relationship. This couldn't be further from a personal relationship. But everybody here in this country on the media side and everyone on the sort of liberal supporting side, that's how they view it. And that's how they try to sell it to everyone else. Like it's some kind of personal, intimate partner relationship. Like Trump is being mean to us. He's a bully. He's mistreating us. We should break up with him, break up with the US and go find somebody else. Let's go find ourselves a handsome European man. These people, man. Trump's a big meanie. The big orange turd, they call him. The big orange turd. He's meanie. What we should do is go find ourselves a European guy or maybe an Asian guy. They won't be mean to us. Like we can take them. Thanks for tuning in today, everybody. It was a little bit different episode as I was sitting here having a conversation with my wife. And honestly, I like to sit here and talk to you about things and you and I can just chat about it. But then what has to happen is I got to record 2 hours of stuff to come up with 20 minutes of conversation. You know, by the time we clip it all up and make it useful and cut out the stuff that we should cut out. But anyway, let's leave it at this. Summary of today's topic. This ban on preventing people from going into the woods, I think is ridiculous. I do think it's important, of course, that we pay attention and get ahead of this forest fire thing. And we want to prevent forest fires. But there's a whole bigger topic there. We can't control the weather. We can control our forest management. I don't know how much of that's being done, but this idea of banning people from going into the woods is crazy. Secondly, this U.S. trade agreement thing, I just think people need to get their heads out of their asses here and look at this for what it is. This is crazy. We are talking about two countries that do somewhere in the neighborhood of like $3.5 billion a day in trade. And on this side of the border here in Canada, this government, this Mark Carney and these liberals and all of the media that support them, they're trying to just paint this as some kind of abusive personal relationship that we should distance ourselves from and go find nicer people to deal with. And that's just insane. That is such a ridiculously insane thing to suggest. But even more ridiculous than that is how this thing has been handled thus far. And that is to be completely ignored by both the Prime Minister and his entire administration and everybody involved. They have made exactly zero effort to even attempt to resolve this situation. And as far as I'm concerned, I've dealt with people like Trump before, obviously not Trump, not presidents of the United States, but big feeling, aggressive, alpha male, bully type guys who at the end of the day, they do just want to do a deal. It's just that they want what's in the best interest of their own country. And they're the easiest people to deal with. You just got to make them feel like they won. You just got to pump their tires a little bit. You just got to give them enough that they feel it was their idea and you're just going along with their idea. Just make them feel good about it. That's literally all you have to do. If Mark Carney or anyone else, but I mean, Carney's the guy who has to do it. If right from the get-go he had gone and publicly even stated, we need the U.S., we recognize this relationship, we know how important the U.S. is to Canada, we know how important this relationship is, we know the long history. No two countries are more closely intertwined than Canada and the U.S. No country in the world depends more on any other country than Canada depends on the U.S. We recognize that. We know where we stand, but we also know that we have plenty of stuff going for ourselves. We're not going to put up with being treated like shit. We need to be respected. But we need what's in the best interest of Canadians, and you need what's in the best interest of Americans. But what's in the best interest of Canadians and Americans is for Canada and the U.S. to continue our prosperous, fruitful relationship. Continue our business working relationship. Have people crossing the border. Millions of people every day crossing the border. Billions of dollars in trade every day crossing the border. We just need to preserve that relationship. But we did this thing where the liberals and the media and everybody has painted Trump to be this lunatic. And I should say also for the record that I'm not suggesting that I'm this huge Trump fan. Like I'm not MAGA, whatever that means. People always say up here like, oh, you're just MAGA. Well, MAGA stands for Make America Great Again. So no, I'm not MAGA. Now in saying that, I'm all for and completely support the idea of a strong America. We need that. We rely on them. I want America to be America, right? No, I'm not a huge Trump fan. I'm not like a Trump can do no wrong type thing. I don't care for how he does everything. I don't like how he's too abrasive. He's too abrupt. He's too chaotic. He's creating way too much chaos in the world. It's unnecessary to be doing it that way. I think he could be more respectful about it. I think he could be less chaotic about it. I think he could be far more diplomatic. I've always said that I don't think Trump makes a great politician, but I respect the way he operates when it comes to the business side of things, because when I see him do it, I realize and recognize, and always have, he understands how to do business. That's the thing. He understands leverage. He understands positioning. He knows that Canada is not holding the cards here. They have all the power. They're 10 times our size. That's not even up for debate. And when people say things online and social media, I've seen it a number of times. Yeah, where they're like, we don't need the US. They need us more than we need them. That's insane. Their brain is not functioning correctly, or they have just absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And it's likely the latter. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe. My name's Ryan McNeil. I'm just a builder by day. Thanks for listening. See you next time.